Story 1. It all started the day we moved into the old Victorian house on Hawthorne Street. The house was massive, far larger than what we had expected, with towering walls and ivy crawling up the sides like something out of a Gothic novel. We had found it in a quaint suburban town in Ohio, surrounded by sprawling fields and tall trees. It seemed perfect, a fresh start for our small family after my husband, Mark, got a job transfer. However, there was one thing that I never expected: the cemetery next door. At first, I thought it was just part of the town's old charm. The cemetery had been there for as long as anyone could remember, its gravestones weathered by time, some of them so old the names had faded. I never thought much about it, at least not until the strange things started happening. One evening, after the sun had set and the house was quiet, I went out to the backyard to check on the garden. It was then I first saw him, a tall man dressed in a white suit, standing by the cemetery gate. His skin was pale, almost ghostly white, and his eyes were bright red, as though they were glowing in the dim light. I froze, staring at him, unsure if my eyes were playing tricks on me. He didn't seem to move, but I felt an eerie pull in my chest as though something was drawing me toward him. "Come and live with me in my house," he said, his voice cold and hollow, echoing through the still night air. "You and your family are welcome here. You don't have to stay in this old, cursed house." I was startled, my breath catching in my throat. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the encounter as a trick of the mind. "Who are you?" I whispered, though the words barely escaped my lips. The man didn't answer. He just stood there, his eyes fixed on me, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I turned and ran inside, slamming the door behind me, my heart racing. I told Mark about the strange encounter, but he just brushed it off, thinking I had imagined the whole thing. The next few days were strange. I could feel the presence of someone or something watching me, especially when I went into the garden or near the cemetery. I would catch glimpses of the man with red eyes standing by the cemetery gate, always at night, always staring at me with that same unsettling expression. Each time, he would say the same thing: "Come and live with me." I tried to ignore him, but the feeling grew stronger. I couldn't shake the thought that he was trying to lure me into the cemetery, into his world. I couldn't understand why, but something deep inside me felt as though the house, the land, was not as it seemed. I began to notice things shifting around the house. Objects would move on their own, small things at first, like a chair being out of place or a glass that I could swear was on the counter but was now on the table. But then it started to escalate. The walls would groan, as if the house itself was alive, and I could hear footsteps in the attic, even when I was sure no one was up there. At night, I would hear whispers, faint at first, but growing louder, as if someone were calling my name from within the walls. One evening, when Mark was working late, I ventured outside, determined to get some answers. I walked towards the cemetery, the cold night air biting at my skin. As I approached the gate, the man appeared once again, standing at the same spot, waiting for me. He smiled, but it was a smile that made my blood run cold. His red eyes seemed to shimmer in the darkness, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. "Come with me," he urged. "It's better with me. The house will take you. If you don't leave, come and live in my house, away from all the pain and suffering." For the first time, I found myself trembling. The man's voice was hypnotic, and despite my fear, a part of me was tempted. The thought of leaving the cursed house behind, of finding a place of peace, was so appealing. But deep down, I knew something was horribly wrong. I backed away, shaking my head, and turned to run. But as I did, the ground beneath me seemed to shift. The cemetery gate groaned, and the man let out a low laugh, sending a chill down my spine. "You can't escape," he called after me. "The house is already part of you. And soon, you'll be part of me." I ran inside, slamming the door behind me, my heart racing. I went straight to the phone to call Mark, but the line was dead. I looked out the window, and the man was gone, but I knew he was still there, watching. I locked every door and window, trying to shake the feeling that something was coming for me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The whispers continued, louder now, echoing through the house. They seemed to come from every corner, from the walls, the floor, the air itself. I lay in bed, unable to move, as the house seemed to groan and shift around me. The man's voice called out in my mind, "Come and live with me." In the morning, I packed my things. I told Mark everything, how the man had been haunting me, how the house was alive with malevolent energy. We couldn't stay there any longer. Mark was shocked, but he could see the fear in my eyes. We left that day, abandoning the house and the strange cemetery that had been part of it. We never spoke of the man again. The house, however, remained on Hawthorne Street, as if waiting for the next family to move in. And sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I can still hear the whispers, calling me back, urging me to come and live with him. The end. Story 2. It was the perfect piece of land, tucked away in a quiet part of the town, surrounded by towering trees and a thick veil of mist that clung to the earth every morning. The land was affordable, and we were ready to build our dream home. My wife, Emily, and I had been looking for years for the perfect place, and when we found it, we knew we couldn't pass it up. There was just one thing: nobody had lived there in decades. The plot was isolated, overgrown, and covered in wild grass. When we asked the realtor about the land's history, he was a bit evasive. He mentioned that a few old gravestones were scattered around, remnants of an old cemetery. But he quickly brushed it off, saying the cemetery had been abandoned for many years, and the bodies had been relocated before any development took place. It seemed odd, but we trusted the realtor's word and decided to proceed with the sale. We didn't ask many questions. We were too excited about finally building our home. The first few months were filled with excitement. We worked together, picking out the perfect designs, choosing the best materials, and watching the house take shape. It was an amazing feeling building a house from the ground up, knowing it would be a place where we'd spend the rest of our lives. We didn't think about the cemetery much. After all, it was in the past, and we had the future to look forward to. The house was completed just as the first frost of winter began to settle over the land. We moved in without a second thought, eager to start this new chapter. The first night, we were giddy with excitement, overwhelmed by the idea of a brand new home. But that night something changed. I woke up in the middle of the night, feeling uneasy. The air was still, too still. The house felt cold, even though the heater was on full blast. I turned over to Emily, but she was sound asleep, curled up next to me. I tried to shake the strange feeling in my chest, telling myself it was just the nerves of moving into a new place. I closed my eyes, trying to get back to sleep, but then I heard something. A whisper. It was faint at first, but then it grew louder. It sounded like someone was speaking right next to my ear, their voice low and raspy. I shot up in bed, my heart racing. "Wake up! Wake up!" It won't be good if you don't wake up. I looked around the dark room, my eyes adjusting to the dim light from the moon outside. The whispering continued, growing more insistent. I turned to Emily, shaking her gently. Emily, do you hear that? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She stirred in her sleep but didn't wake up. I felt a chill run down my spine. There was no one in the room, but the whispering kept echoing in my head. It wasn't just a sound, it felt like it was coming from the walls themselves. I got out of bed, feeling a cold sweat on my forehead. The room was silent again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I walked to the window and looked out at the sprawling yard. The night was calm, but I couldn't help but feel like something was watching me. Something had been there before, something that shouldn't have been disturbed. The next morning, I tried to shake off the eerie feeling. It was probably just the stress of the move, the excitement of the new house. But that night, the whispers returned. This time, they were louder, the words clearer. I was awake, but I couldn't move, paralyzed by fear. I could feel a presence in the room, like someone was standing right next to me. I turned to Emily, but she was still asleep. I felt as though I was being watched by something I couldn't see. The whispers echoed in my mind again, louder this time. Wake up. It won't be good if you don't wake up. It was then that I noticed something strange. From the corner of my eye, I saw a figure dark and shadowy, almost human, but not quite. It seemed to fade in and out of view, like it was made of smoke or fog. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its eyes on me. I turned quickly, but it was gone. I jumped out of bed, my heart pounding in my chest. I rushed to turn on the lights, but as I flicked the switch, the room stayed dark. The lights wouldn't come on. Panic began to rise in me. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. That was the night I first started to investigate the history of the land. I went to the town hall the next day, hoping to find more information about the cemetery and the land's past. The woman at the desk was helpful, but her eyes flickered with unease when I mentioned the cemetery. She told me that the land had indeed once been a cemetery, a burial ground for people who had lived in the area long before our time. But, according to the records, the cemetery had been relocated when the town started developing. No one knew exactly where the bodies had gone, but the land was cleared, and the cemetery had been erased from memory. When I got back to the house that evening, I felt a growing sense of dread. That night, as Emily slept beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was in the house with us. The whispering returned, but this time it was more than just a voice. The sound was accompanied by a presence in the room. I could feel someone standing over me, watching me, but when I looked, there was nothing there. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was just the stress. But the whispers kept coming, night after night. Sometimes they'd come from the walls, sometimes from the floorboards, and each time they seemed more urgent, more desperate. One night, I woke up to the sound of something dragging across the floor. My heart skipped a beat, and I turned on the light, but there was nothing there. I quickly checked the house, but everything seemed normal to normal. Then the whispers came again, but this time they weren't the only thing I heard. From the corner of the room, I saw a figure emerge from the shadows. It was tall, dark, its face obscured by the darkness. It was a person, but not human. Its form flickered in and out of view, like it was made of smoke or mist. I could hear its voice now, louder than before. "You shouldn't have disturbed me. You shouldn't have built here." The voice was deep and resonant, echoing in my mind. I felt like I was drowning in it, unable to breathe. The figure stepped closer, its presence overwhelming. It was as if the very air had thickened, become suffocating. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I was paralyzed by fear. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, the figure was gone. The room was silent again, but the air still felt heavy, oppressive. The whispers had stopped, but the sense of dread lingered. I couldn't stay there anymore. I told Emily everything, and we agreed to leave. We packed up our things and moved into a new house in town. But even now, I can still hear the whispers sometimes late at night, when I'm trying to sleep. And I can still see the shadowy figure, just out of the corner of my eye, watching me, waiting. The land beneath that house, there's something buried there, something that was never meant to be disturbed. And whatever it is, it doesn't want to be forgotten. The end. Story 3. It was well past midnight when I finally decided to leave the office. The clock read 12 a.m., and I had been working late once again. The silence in the building was almost eerie, with only the hum of the air conditioning in the background. I gathered my things and made my way toward the exit, eager to get home. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me like a wall. The street was deserted, and the only light came from the distant street lamps. The cemetery behind the office was as silent as ever, the tall, crumbling gravestones casting long shadows in the pale moonlight. I walked toward my car, but as I passed the cemetery gate, something strange happened. I suddenly felt a chill, one that seemed to seep through my bones. My hands and feet went numb, and my heart started racing for no reason at all. I stopped in my tracks, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling. At first, I thought it was just the cold night air playing tricks on me. But then, I saw something. In the distance, just beyond the gate, there was a figure. It stood motionless, too still to be human, shrouded in darkness. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. My mind screamed at me to turn around, but my body wouldn't obey. I tried to tell myself it was just a shadow or some trick of the light, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was real. The figure remained there, unmoving, staring directly at me. A sudden gust of wind sent shivers down my spine as the air grew thick with unease. I couldn't take it anymore. I rushed to my car, my heart pounding in my chest, but the image of that figure stayed with me. I quickly drove away, but even as I left the office behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, following me, lingering. In the dark, that night, I learned that some things are better left undisturbed, and some places are better left unexplored. The cemetery behind my office remained a mystery, a dark and unsettling memory that I couldn't escape. Ask Chat.